Brian eyed the egg suspiciously and asked Cyan where he got it. Cyan shrugged, claiming he found it on the street during a walk. Brian wasn't convinced. After all, who just finds something like that lying around? Cyan maintained his story with a nonchalant expression, but his mind raced with questions about how Zickerman could be selling something so dangerous. He wondered if the egg was meant for someone specific. Brian's worry shifted to the egg potentially hatching. Cyan tried to reassure him, explaining that it wouldn't. Dragons are essentially condensed mana with various elements, he said. Even if you infuse it with the right mana, it might not hatch without its mother. Separated dragon eggs are usually just fancy rocks. But then, a crack echoed through the room. Both Cyan and Brian froze, staring at the egg as light began to spill from the fissures. They exchanged a glance, silently acknowledging their predicament. They had messed up. The egg split open, revealing a small girl with dragon horns. Brian panicked, exclaiming to his young master that the egg had hatched. "What are we going to do?" he stammered. Cyan stood still, stunned. The creature before them was neither fully dragon nor human. It dawned on him that the woman must have been nurturing a draconic human, a hybrid. The draconic girl looked up at Cyan and uttered, "Pa," before clinging to him, calling him Papa. Cyan was astonished, wondering if the girl thought he was her parent. Karam, amused by the situation, let out a small laugh before teasing Cyan about being an 11-year-old dad. In his head, Cyan blamed Karam for the mess. She had insisted he take the egg, arguing it would be dangerous in the wrong hands. Back then, Cyan worried about the egg hatching. Karam had assured him she had never seen a dragon egg hatch after losing its mother, explaining that it was just a dangerous stone. Now, watching the girl cling to him, Karam admitted she never expected this to happen. Cyan glowered, dark energy practically radiating from him. He reminded Karam that she promised the egg wouldn't hatch. Karam, still amused, repeated that she never thought she'd witness such an event. She pointed out that a hybrid like the girl would be a threat simply by existing. The girl was now asleep in Cyan's lap. Despite the peaceful moment, Cyan understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't a typical hybrid, it was a mix between a dragon and a human. Such a being was a risk in their dangerous world. If the Academy discovered her, the Dean might take drastic measures to eliminate potential threats. Furthermore, dragons were known for their strictness regarding bloodlines. If they learned about the girl's existence, they would likely eradicate anyone aware of her. Cyan hesitated, weighing the risk of what he was about to do. He gazed at the child, contemplating her fate. Was a life filled with suffering worth living? He questioned whether it would be kinder to end her pain now. Beside him, Karam watched, understanding Cyan's intention and silently agreeing that perhaps it was for the best. Cyan placed his hand gently around the girl's neck, preparing to choke her. Karam shared his belief that if her destiny was only misery, then maybe a quick end was more merciful. But as Cyan steeled himself, the child slowly opened her eyes. Disoriented, she murmured, "Papa." In that moment, Cyan's resolve wavered. The child leapt up, wrapping her arms around him and exclaiming her affection. The warmth of her embrace startled him. He held her close, lifting her into the air, and felt a strange emotion stirring within him. What was this feeling? "It will work out somehow," Cyan whispered, still unsure of himself. "Let's raise her, Karam." Karam scoffed, finding his change of heart weak. "Are you just raising her to be your servant?" she wondered aloud. Meanwhile, at Verret Castle, Margaret paced anxiously. She feared for Krantz, worried about the repercussions of Cyan's actions. Ashel appeared silently behind her, causing her to gasp in surprise. He offered his support, urging her to confide in him if she was troubled. Margaret thanked him but hurriedly denied any problems, retreating hastily. Once she was gone, Ashel turned to Kellen. "Report," he ordered. Kellen relayed grim news: 6 knights had been found dead in the Velius Mountains. It seemed the remaining knight had disappeared along with the youngest son. Ashel suspected Margaret's involvement and pressed for more information. Kellen admitted that the youngest son had been placed in the royal hall, and their informant had gone silent since. Ashel, already aware of this, deduced that Kellen had found nothing about his brother. Disappointment flickered in his eyes, making Kellen uneasy. Ashel was not known for tolerating failure. Determined to prove himself, Kellen volunteered to investigate personally, pleading for another chance. Ashel, recognizing Kellen's diligence, agreed. "Be quick about it," he advised, assigning Kellen to uncover what Cyan was hiding. Back at the academy, Sarika hurried down the corridor. She burst into Cyan's room to find him feeding the child a bottle of milk, while Karam held the infant. "What brings you here when there are no classes?" Cyan asked, raising an eyebrow. "What a cute family," Sarika quipped, puzzled by the sight of the baby. "It's a long story," Cyan replied with a sigh. "But why are you here?" Sarika explained that they had an urgent matter. "You've caused quite a stir," she said, brandishing a document, a duel request between Cyan and Seth. She scolded him for attracting unwanted attention, noting that even the principal was getting involved. Cyan chuckled at the thought of Seth actually managing to file the paperwork. Karam dismissed the duel as insignificant. "It's just 11-year-olds fighting," she remarked. But Cyan knew Seth was no ordinary 11-year-old. "When is the duel?" Cyan inquired. "In 2 hours," Sarika replied. Cyan groaned, scratching his head. "That's sooner than I expected," he admitted. Seth had been anticipating this moment, while Cyan could only sigh. Seth approached Cyan with a confident grin. He mentioned his desire for a duel of pure combat but acknowledged that the official options were limited to swordsmanship and magic. He inquired if Cyan planned to use magic during their fight. Cyan replied casually, "If you're not using magic, then I won't either." This answer seemed to please Seth, who nodded in approval. "Good, I like you," Seth said before lunging forward to test Cyan's skill. Cyan was immediately impressed by Seth's speed, especially given his stocky build. He noticed the substantial weight behind Seth's sword strikes, making them powerful but relatively easy to deflect. As Seth swung with all his might, Cyan deftly parried the blow, catching Seth off guard. Cyan understood that brute strength wasn't the key to defeating someone like Seth. Instead, he relied on sharp precision and quick reflexes. Seth, realizing his attacks weren't landing as he hoped, adjusted his strategy. Their swords clashed repeatedly, but Seth found himself struggling against Cyan's technique. During one of Seth's aggressive maneuvers, he attempted to slip behind Cyan and aim for his back. However, Cyan anticipated the move, sheathing his sword in one swift motion and catching Seth's leg instead. Seth was startled, as if Cyan had eyes in the back of his head. Before Seth could be slammed to the ground, he expertly softened his fall with his hands, quickly retaliating with a kick. Cyan was amused by Seth's resilience and noted his surprising agility. The crowd watching the duel was captivated, some questioning if Seth was more than human. Despite breathing heavily, Seth grinned widely, eventually bursting into laughter. "I admit defeat in swordsmanship," he declared, "but now, I'll do whatever it takes to win." Seth announced he was ready to unleash his full potential in the fight. Inwardly, Cyan sighed, finding Seth's enthusiasm both exhausting and infectious. Seth urged him to give everything he had as well, releasing an explosive surge of power that cracked the ground beneath them. "Cyan vert," he yelled, preparing for the next phase of their duel. The dean observed the scene with intrigue, speculating whether the two would now engage in a magical battle. He admired their boldness for choosing not to combine magic and swordsmanship from the start. Sarika commented that Cyan had already won the sword fight, and the dean agreed. Physically, Seth Chaharkin was rated A, while Cyan Vert was rated S, making the outcome somewhat predictable based on those rankings. However, the dean knew that physical prowess was just the foundation for casting advanced spells. Notably, Seth was ranked 3 stars in mana, the highest among the students, prompting curiosity about Cyan's next move. Sarika looked annoyed by the attention Cyan was garnering. Meanwhile, Seth summoned a massive hand from the earth, known as the Death Fist, while Cyan braced himself for the magical confrontation. The giant hand smashed into the ground, and Cyan prepared to dodge, but Seth was relentless, launching simultaneous attacks to corner him. Seth then conjured the Desert Tooth, a barrier that erupted from the ground, transforming into a glowing yellow cage around Cyan. The arena was shrouded in swirling sand, and Cyan recognized the prowess of Seth's 3-star mana rank. Despite the swirling sandstorm threatening to engulf him, Cyan stepped aside gracefully, evading Seth's latest attack with ease. He had keenly observed Seth's previous moves and suspected that Seth possessed the ability to cast even more powerful, 4-star spells. Glancing towards the barrier enclosing the arena, he noted that the instructors maintaining it appeared to be struggling to hold it together. "How long are you going to scurry around like a rat?" Seth taunted, his frustration mounting. Cyan responded with a wry smile, "Should I have just stood there and let you hit me?" Feeling provoked, Seth shot back, "A true warrior wouldn't dodge." In the heat of the moment, he called Cyan a child, which made Cyan chuckle. "You do realize you're a kid too, right?" Cyan pointed out, further angering Seth. "Shut up!" Seth shouted as he unleashed the sandstorm spell, summoning a powerful vortex of swirling sands. The dean watched with interest, while Sarika was taken aback, realizing that Seth had indeed cast a 4-star spell, surpassing his supposed 3-star rank. Determined to ensure Cyan couldn't avoid this attack, Seth focused all his energy on the sandstorm. In a surprising move, Cyan stopped evading and stood his ground, grinning as he announced, "I'll take it head-on." In another scene, a bottle of milk rested on a table. Brian, wearing a pink apron, tested the temperature on his wrist, reminiscing about his past experience caring for his younger siblings. Though it had been annoying at the time, he was now grateful for the skills he'd gained. He called out to the princess, announcing that it was time to eat, but gasped when he saw how much she had grown in such a short period. Back in the arena, the audience was confused, unable to see through the dense sands of the storm. The barrier surrounding them began to crack under the pressure, and the instructors were struggling to reinforce it. One of them wondered aloud how the students could possess such power, while another questioned the dean's absence, given the escalating situation. Sarika urged the dean to intervene, but he advised patience, sensing that something was happening within the storm. Cyan had activated a secret technique known as the Void Sphere, a powerful expansion spell. Sarika recognized it immediately and pleaded for him to stop. The sandstorm was gradually absorbed by a dark orb resembling a black hole, which fascinated the dean. He expressed admiration for Cyan, noting how he consistently exceeded expectations. Meanwhile, Sarika was panicking, unable to fathom why Cyan would use such a technique in a public setting. As the black hole continued to draw in the storm, the swirling sands vanished completely, leaving Seth bewildered. The audience was astonished by the spell's sudden disappearance and speculated about Cyan's capabilities, curious about the nature of the mysterious magic sphere. Cyan turned to Seth and asked, "Do you want to continue?" Seth, panting heavily, admitted his defeat. Dropping to his knees, he muttered in disbelief, unable to comprehend that he had lost in both swordsmanship and magic. The defeat weighed on him, leaving him feeling momentarily depressed. Watching Seth, Cyan felt a pang of sympathy. Suddenly, Seth punched the ground and exclaimed, "This is good." He was actually pleased, expressing that the challenge invigorated him after growing tired of defeating weaker opponents. He extended a hand to Cyan, smiling as he suggested they fight again in the future. "Would you accept my challenge next time?" Cyan shook Seth's hand, but replied, "No thanks." After the duel, Cyan returned to his room, still processing the recent events. He was taken aback when he saw the child again, noting that her growth spurt was astonishingly fast. The draconic human girl now resembled a 6-year-old. She greeted Cyan warmly, calling him Papa. Cyan realized that a dragon-human hybrid matured rapidly and speculated she might soon look his age. Brian commented on her accelerated growth, to which Cyan replied, "It's going to be hard to keep her a secret with how quickly she's growing." At that moment, Sarika entered the room and joined the conversation. "Eventually, you won't be able to hide her anymore," she remarked. Sarika offered to help Cyan conceal the demonic sword but insisted she couldn't assist with hiding a draconic human, especially if Cyan continued to draw attention like he did earlier. Sarika exuded a menacing aura as she questioned Cyan about his plans. Sensing the tension, Karam awoke, noticing that someone was talking about her. The child's wings had widened, and her tail had grown larger as she stood taller. Cyan marveled at her rapid development, realizing how much she had changed in such a short time. Sarika, still emitting an ominous presence, reminded Cyan that he was responsible for dealing with the consequences of something he had brought back from a mission. Handling a child like this was no easy task. Cyan explained to Sarika that Brian was responsible for taking care of the girl. Brian's surprised reaction was amusing, as he was just learning about this arrangement. Cyan further explained that a barrier had been set up in the dorm to conceal both Karam and the child's presence. Sarika replied that the barrier would remain effective as long as Cyan didn't stir up trouble. She handed Cyan a red envelope. He took it and remarked that it was a disappointing reward for winning the duel. Sarika cautioned him to lie low for a while, warning that nothing good comes from attracting too much attention. Brian asked what the envelope contained. Cyan answered that it was a warning letter. When Brian pressed for more details, Cyan explained that it was essentially a notice threatening expulsion for any misconduct, leaving Brian in shock. The child looked up at Cyan and asked what they should do, expressing concern about whether they would end up living on the streets. Cyan chuckled, wondering where she picked up that phrase, unsure if she even understood its meaning. The girl was growing up too quickly. He reassured her that there was nothing to worry about. Brian voiced his concerns about the situation, especially since returning to Velius was not a desirable option. Cyan reassured him not to fret, as he planned to file a complaint. He noted that the letter was directly from the dean, not the administration office, leading him to believe the dean wanted to speak with him personally. As Cyan contemplated the upcoming meeting with the dean, he recalled a past conversation with him from another life. The dean had asked Cyan if he truly intended to join the Knights of Light and live for his brother's sake. Cyan had affirmed his decision, but the dean expressed skepticism, suggesting the path didn't suit him. This had infuriated Cyan, as the dean had assumed Cyan was aware of it too. The dean advised him that no good would come from choosing that path, warning that facing trials or cruel fates would yield no benefits. He described it as living as someone else's puppet, destined to blame his brother regardless of the outcome. Remembering these words irritated Cyan, and he wondered what the dean would say to him this time. In an attempt to lighten the mood, Brian suggested giving the child a name, arguing that they couldn't keep calling her Kid. Without much deliberation, Cyan casually suggested the name Nana. Brian was surprised, noting the lack of thought behind the choice, but the child beamed with excitement. She loved the name and pointed out with delight that Nana was a palindrome. With sparkling eyes, she declared her desire to be called Nana Vert. Cyan was taken aback, wondering how she knew his last name. A few moments later, in the Royal Academy Dean's office, the Dean, Kundal Quissel, was busy writing a document. He pondered the potential of Cyan Vert, acknowledging his immense talent. The Dean was particularly impressed by Cyan's ability to absorb a 4-star spell using the Black Sphere, noting that it seemed to require little effort from him. His curiosity was piqued about the extent of Cyan's capabilities. Kundal Quissel was a prominent figure, having taught the current emperor, Dion Severus, and being the father of the late empress, Diana Quissel. As one of the few 9-star mages on the continent, Kundal had dedicated himself to educating students at the academy after Diana's death. However, Cyan had one lingering question about him. He had always viewed Kundal as a pacifist, yet in this life, he had unexpectedly intervened in the royal succession conflict. Cyan wondered what had motivated this change and what it meant for his own future. Cyan paused in his tracks as a gust of wind swept in from the door. It seemed to him that Kundal's personality remained unchanged. He tapped the air in front of him, revealing a shimmering golden barrier. Kundal knows I'm coming, Cyan muttered to himself, noting the presence of a 9-star area restriction barrier. Undeterred, he decided to take on the challenge, which made the Dean grin in anticipation. He was curious to see how Cyan would bypass the barrier, something only a great mage could achieve. To his surprise, Cyan broke through the tall window behind him and gracefully landed inside the office. Dean Kundal? Cyan called out, introducing himself and explaining that he was there to contest a complaint. The Dean was amused by Cyan's unconventional entry, admitting to himself that he had been outmaneuvered. He asked Cyan about the disagreement he mentioned. Cyan explained that the letter supposedly came from the Dean, but the presence of the barrier confirmed his suspicion that it was merely a test of his talent. The Dean acknowledged Cyan's insight, admitting that it was an aggressive tactic, but Cyan had indeed proven his abilities. However, the Dean informed him that he would not retract the warning, though Cyan was welcome to try and change his mind. Cyan was taken aback by this and decided to ask the Dean a bold question. He inquired whether Kundal sought expansion for his empire or honor for his family. This question made the Dean grow serious. He remarked that it was a daring question, but neither was his concern. Cyan pressed further, suggesting that after Emperor Dion's death, if the 3rd or 4th prince attempted to seize the throne from the 1st prince, Kundal wouldn't choose sides. The Dean's expression darkened as he accused Cyan of being not only bold but also arrogant. However, Cyan remained unfazed, especially as he remembered the Dean's previous words about him being a puppet for Ashel. In Cyan's past life, during the struggle for the throne, Kundal had wielded significant influence in securing the 1st prince, Lunal Severus, as the emperor. Cyan noted that despite everything, the Dean hadn't changed much from the past. Lunal was a cruel and ruthless man. He murdered all of his siblings, and when Kundal opposed him, Lunal framed Kundal as a traitor to the empire, sentencing him to death. Despite Kundal's efforts to ensure a bright future for Lunal, he ended up betrayed by the very person he had supported. Nonsense, the Dean shouted, his anger boiling over. He demanded to know if Cyan truly believed that the peace of the last century could crumble so easily. Kundal had thought Cyan was a genius, but now he considered him nothing more than a fool. Cyan calmly challenged Kundal's perspective, pointing out that the mother of the 1st prince and 2nd princess had died from an illness. He added that the 3rd and 4th princes were strong contenders for the throne, making them formidable rivals for the 1st prince. Cyan further explained that Empress Cassandra's family, the Napolis household, was notorious for its insatiable hunger for power and would do anything to maintain their position. He warned that the empire's peace was already precarious and predicted that the fall of peace would mean the end of the academy. Kundal felt a twinge of unease. He marveled at the thought process of an 11-year-old, realizing that Cyan was well versed in the intricacies of the current political landscape. "Why are you telling me this?" the Dean asked. Cyan replied, "To negotiate. I'm offering to help secure peace for your family and the academy in exchange for withdrawing the warning." The Dean laughed, but Cyan remained unfazed. Kundal released a magic circle, asking Cyan what power he possessed to make such an offer. Feel the weight of your arrogance, Kundal said, as chains descended from the ceiling's magic circle, encircling Cyan. They were the chains of judgment, wrapping tightly around him. And with that, we must conclude for today. If you enjoyed this part and want to see what happens next, please like and subscribe. Thank you.